So this started out as a drawing in a sketchbook that I had. When I first had this idea, I thought I would be able to do it with just the standard treble clef you would see in music, but there's some very thin parts to the treble clef, and the light bulbs that I was using weren't going to be able to fit into those very thin parts. So I sketched out a treble clef that was more of a uniform width and put that into Photoshop. And this is just me cutting out all the shapes from that Photoshop image because I blew it up to the size that I needed, which was about, I think, 3 feet tall. It's somewhere around 3 feet. And then the next step is to piece them all together, and I just used Scotch tape to hold the cut pieces together. And it was interesting. I think I had one of those out of sequence. It confused me. The next step was to put that pattern onto the piece of plywood that I was using, and I just used some spray adhesive so that I could just spray the board and then lay the paper down on top of it, and the paper wouldn't go anywhere once I started cutting. And there were a few spots that I had to fill in by hand, just because I didn't want to print out a piece of paper for those little spots. I had to raise it up from the actual table so that the router that I was using wouldn't hit the table. So if you're using some sort of jigsaw or just a craft tool like I'm using, then just make sure that it's up off the table. And then it's just cutting it out. The spray glue keeps the paper in place, and you don't have to mess with trying to hold that while you're also trying to maneuver the tool. And I'm just using a Dremel, just a craft drill here as a routing tool. It has that little attachment on it that you can use to route out shapes like this that are irregular. They're not just straight cuts. And then I peeled off the paper as much as I could, cleaned up a little bit, and I also drilled out the holes where the lights are going to go, and I just used a Forstner bit. I think it was a 1/2-inch Forstner bit for that. And this is just cleaning up all the curves in the shape. So that router did an okay job, but since it's just a little craft router, it's not the most stable of things, so I had to go back and smooth out the curves so that they were a little bit more uniform. You can see it's got some chatter in the cuts. So this is going to help in the next step of putting on the plastic channeling that's going to actually make the sides of the sign. So just a couple of different types of files that I'm using here. One's just a semicircle. I think I also had a round file in there as well to get into the little corners. But the semicircle file worked just fine in smoothing out those curves. And then I just sanded the top of it to knock down the rest of the paper and the spray glue that was still on there. And these are the lights that we're going to use. And it doesn't fit all the way through because there's a little clip on the back. So the next step is to cut off all the little clips about halfway through. So you can still kind of use them to rest on the back, but now they're flush with the top. And then this next step is just laying them out to make sure that there's enough wire in between each of the lights to make it to the next hole, and just to kind of lay out how I wanted the wiring to go, and make sure that there was enough room. So once I double checked that it was time to put on the plastic channeling. This is just some polycarbonate plastic. It's pretty thin and flexible, so that it'll form around those curves easily. And I'm just using super glue and some CA glue activator to make it a little easier. So I just start cutting the pieces to length with a craft knife, and then putting some of the CA glue on the plastic itself, putting some on the wood, and holding it in place, and then hitting it with the activator. And the activator works pretty much instantly to where it'll set that glue, so you can go to the next piece. And then just doing the same thing all the way around, cutting a piece to length. If it needs to curve a little bit, bending it a little bit and making sure that it fits the curve. Putting the CA glue on the wood, putting it on the plastic, holding it in place, and then hitting it with that activator to set it in place. And I think I cut these strips into 2.5 inches wide. I ended up getting a sheet off the internet because I couldn't really find it anywhere near me, and I kind of wish I had gotten like an opaque white. It seems like that would have worked a little better instead of having that transparent. It's kind of hard to see in the video. And I may or may not have super glued this thing to that craft mat once or twice during the making of this. So be careful if you're doing this yourself. Make sure that you have a mat or something that you don't mind super gluing together, because if that CA glue gets on anything else and you hit it with that activator, it's gonna set right away. So just be very careful with that. And you can pretty much make this any size that you want. I ended up making this one as big as I did because it fit the lights that I had gotten. So I think the lights are just round, just a round bulb, but they're about 1 inch in diameter, maybe 1.5 inches. And so I had to make sure that there was enough room in the channel for 1.5 inch wide bulb. So here's the whole thing, and it's on my fancy painting rig, where I'm gonna hang it up and hit it with some spray paint. I ended up going with a red color. So this is about, I don't know, I think 2 coats of red spray paint and just a clear lacquer. So the next step is to get that light string back out again, and to hold them in place, I just used hot glue. So I pressed them to where they sat flush with the front side of the sign, and then hot gluing the backs to just hold it in place, and it worked really well. I ended up using the little clips on the back side of the sockets. Actually helped with some of the wire management. So if you see there, I'm looping the wire through the clip, so those ended up helping out a whole lot to help keep the wire manageable so it wouldn't stick out the sides. And here it is. I think maybe next time I'll try and get smaller lights. It ended up being fairly big, bigger than what I thought it was going to be. So, yeah, thanks for watching.